Welcome to 28 Days and Beyond.
The show where we talk about our history, our heritage, and our culture.
I'm Amari.
I'm Charisma. Welcome. Hey AJ,
Yeah,
how are you?
yeah, yeah. What's going on?
Not much maintaining.
Excellent. So listen, one of the things that we've been talking about this season have been all the changes that have happened to our community. I mean, the world was focusing specifically on our community during the past year and moving forward. And one of them theme that always comes up is that of education. How do you think schools have
Absolutely.
changed forever?
I mean, I think the protocols in school have changed forever for sure, just in terms of, how they're able to actually keep children safe. But I think one of the more important topics for us to talk about specifically on this show is just how our children are actually being educated in schools now that we've experienced what it's like to be at home and experience virtual learning, and what that's going to
Yeah,
translate into once our children actually get back to school, and what that looks like as far as the curriculum is concerned,
right, right, right,
which has
right.
always been an
You
issue.
know, has always been an issue. And, I am happy to have with us today a brother who I always look to for really expanding our thinking around education and curriculum and all of that sort of thing as it pertains to us and our people. And that is my brother, Tashango and Billy Shaka, who is, I call him a master teacher. When we get our own Black Nation, I want him to be the minister of education. And I think we'll all benefit from it. So we welcome now Tashango and Billy Shaka. Brother
That's
Tashango,
right.
what's up, man?
My man, salute, man. Good to see you,
Yeah,
Welcome.
yeah,
brother
yeah.
Amari. Thank you,
Yeah, yeah,
Charisma,
yeah,
for having
yeah,
me.
yeah.
Welcome to Shango. Our pleasure.
So let's jump into it, man. You've recently published
Let's
a book
dive
called
in.
"There
Yeah.
Has to Be." There has to be a better way. 10 actions you can do now to empower your children and build stronger relationships when the world requires you to stay at home. Now, what's really interesting about this subtitle is that it really focuses that you're saying, there's educational things that are internal to the family and to the home. Break that down.
Yeah, so basically, there's two things we should never outsource. We should never outsource our children's education, and we should never
Mm,
outsource our personal security. I'm very much into preparedness as well, so I've always felt like we need to be in charge of the development of the character of our children. We need to be very clear on what we want our children to become, and we also need to teach our
mm,
children, and we need to teach ourselves how to defend ourselves, because you can call people, but they're not going to make it there in time to save you or your family. And your
mm,
children, they are the greatest thing that you'll ever do in the world. 50 years from now, it won't matter that you had an expensive purse. It won't matter that you had, you know, a nice car. All of those things will be out the door. But what will matter is your children who will be there to take care of you. Will they have the skills in order to provide for you and your family?
yeah, definitely.
That's absolutely true, and very powerful. And one of the conversations I feel like we've been having for a while, or at least in our communities, has been that parents are our first teachers. You really do learn first
Yeah.
from your parents and from your family. So, what are some of the principles that that you lay out in your book?
So I lay out 10 basic ones. I could have wrote more, but I wanted it to be short, and I did it as an ebook so that parents can click after each point and find African-centered resources. My main
Mm-hmm.
man, Amari, I've been looking at his Sons of Malcolm
Right.
stuff forever, but him and Samori is also my main man. And so even in there, I have links to Samori's work because for too long, I think we've been separated, and we need to continue to work together and come up with what are the best experiences that we can have our children
Mm,
have to develop good character, but also to make
Yeah.
them into global African leaders. So just to get into the 10, because I gotta answer Charisma's question here. The first one that I want to give is, it says basically create a place in your home that has pictures of your family members who passed away. Now that seems really, really basic, but I do think it's a
Mm-hmm.
concern when our children know more about the Marvel stories than we know about our own stories and the stories of our ancestors. I think it's
Our own
important that our children
stories.
realize that
Yeah.
what they're going through is not something necessarily new. What they're going through is some similar things to what their parents and grandparents went through. And it is their obligation to solve the
yeah.
challenges that have faced the family for generations. In Ifa, they say that basically you return back to this life because you didn't solve the ones that you had the opportunity to in other lives where you were your great great
Wow.
grandparents and so forth. So to have images, pictures up of, some people call it like a shrine that would honor your grandparents, even if you had them down the hallway,
Right.
but every day your children could walk by them and say, oh, that's Grandma Francis, right? And then they have to associate a characteristic
Yeah.
with Grandma Francis. So if you know Grandma Francis is a good cook, then when you're cooking together, you can say, Grandma Francis would love this meal. And so you instill a characteristic with a family
Right.
member. And then through doing actions, good character actions, they learn to love their family and appreciate their family even more.
Man, I think that's really powerful because they say we are in a
That's
war and
amazing.
race for the hearts and minds of our people. And you mentioned like the Marvel comics or all the propaganda that is designed to really capture our children with really shiny things from early on. We need to be
Yes.
able to intervene in that and have those positive stories that draw from our own family, be able to say, yeah, well, you know what my
Hmm.
grandfather did, like that's better than whatever Superman could have done, right? Because that's
Yeah.
real, and that's the man whose knee I sat on or whatever have you. uh but one
Yes.
of the things again I think is really powerful is we're talking about this is an opportunity, right? Us being shut in the house,
Right.
uh this is an opportunity for us to be able to really fortify our family, as as Charisma said, as the first school, the first form of the first source of
Yeah.
education. What are some other things that you really recommend people do?
Well, another thing too, as you were speaking, it reminded me, I really love to go hiking. I think that nature is a vital teacher for our children, and
Oh yeah.
they can learn so much more in nature. Knowledge should not be limited to just a classroom. In fact, there's an African proverb says that knowledge does not come to one who sits, but to one who travels.
Absolutely not.
And,
Mm.
and when I take some of the toughest
Mm.
kids into nature, they really start to become like humanized again. Basically, they don't have to be as tough. They'll hear something move and like, oh my God, what is that? And I'm like, man, your nickname is Bloody Blood. Why you jumping? I think it was a squirrel, right? Or a butterfly, right? So basically,
It was a
they're
cricket. Why are
allowed.
you jumping?
Yeah, exactly, right? Butterfly flies by. They're like, what type of bird is that? Right? And you're like,
Yeah,
no, let's
yeah,
talk about what that is. And it also, I want them to sit in nature long enough where they can become one with nature, where nature is not alerting everything else to their presence. And I mean, of
yeah.
course, meditation and all that. But
Wow.
tying into the first piece, though, I just want to say this: to take young brothers and sisters on long hikes where they have to carry a heavy bag, you will hear them say things like what you just said, brother Amari, was where they'd be like, man, I'm not giving up this bag. I can make it because I got my grandfather. He was strong and he would do it.
Mm.
And I know he's with me. And when they have that
Right.
type of mentality, you know that the
That's so
morals and values
true.
you're instilling in them are, being pushed forward.
That's beautiful, man.
Yeah.
One thing I
That's
learned is
so
that you be rolling
important.
with
And
cats named
I
Bloody
think
Blood,
about
huh?
even my own experience. That's pretty funny, Amari. Um,
What was you gonna say, Charisma? I know
Bloody
that's
blood, my homies. Um, well, Amari distracted me and made me laugh, and I sort of lost my train of thought. But what I was going to say was, to your point, it is really important to have that connection. I know, like, a lot of things that we think about just about ourselves and who we are as people and who we develop into has a lot to do with our family, with our ancestors, and different
Yeah.
traits and gifts that were passed down. So it only makes sense for us to be reconnected to those things. Like, I know for me, I came from a family of musicians. So whenever I'm doing music, I always feel
mm,
like I'm channeling my grandfather
Mm.
who passed a few years
yes,
ago because he was a jazz saxophone
yes.
player. So having that connection and knowing your history and knowing the history of, of your ancestors is so important to even knowing who you are.
Yes, yes. And in addition to that, every time you play your jazz music, you're actually channeling his energy, right? You're actually like I know for me, I'll
Absolutely.
give one of my things is I love coffee ice cream, right? And it's like one of my weaknesses. But I know that that coffee ice cream, I eat it because my grandmother used to have us come and sit at the
Nice.
table with her and she
Yeah.
would give us a little bit of milk with some coffee and mix it together and she would go over what she was proud of you with for the year and then she would also go over what she felt your personal challenges were and what she felt like you needed
Wow.
to work on and those time periods just being able to sit at that table, man, I would give $1 billion just to be able to sit with my grandmother 5 more minutes to have
Mm.
one of those conversations because the years
Oof.
that I thought I was the man and I was
That's
on point and I'd
incredible.
be like, grandma, I did this, she would sit me down, like Amari was saying earlier. You might be like, Grandma, I read, 30 books this year. She'd say, That's excellent. But how many relationships did you miss out on making with other people because of the
Mm,
reason? So it puts stuff in balance. Like I know how Hollyweird, and that's why I call it Hollyweird. One of the things that it
yeah,
does is it takes things that are sacred to us, like Big Mama, and desacralizes it, right?
yeah, yeah,
So they can put Tyler Perry in it, so it's no longer as sacred as we know it to be, right? Or put dress
Mhm.
Martin up as it. But the truth of the matter is that sitting at that table, I
Yeah.
associated the negative part of now. Every time I eat ice cream, my wife would be like, "Oh, you miss your grandmother." But really, there's other things that I need to focus on, and I think that's important too, is because a lot of times we look at
Oh,
what negative aspects we got from our family members, but we don't focus on the positive aspects that we get from our family
bro.
members.
right.
That's beautiful, brother. Look, man, that's beautiful.
And that's really
You know, because
important.
my mind is just
Well,
running
before we
to
let you
all the things
go,
that,
I was going
yeah,
to ask,
you got it, Riz.
I'm sorry, Mari, I keep jumping in and out for you,
No,
but
no, no. I mean,
yeah, I
he's
was going to
offering so
ask,
much that it's just
where
like,
can
yeah.
I know, and it's like I'm trying to jump in and you're jumping in, but no, go ahead and finish. I'll tag
I
team
mean,
this with you again.
yeah. Well, no, I mean, I want to follow up and just say, where can people? Because I know, from what you shared, people want to know where they can get the book, and I also want to ask you just one last question, which is, you know,
Yeah.
if you had control of the means of education coming out of this, period, how would you change things?
Oh man, that could be a long question in itself. But um, first, I
Mhm.
said getting in touch with nature. I think this is an opportunity for us to take responsibility. Like being in COVID, you had to sit there and you had to say, "Do I like my home? Do I like the relationship I have with my
Mhm.
significant other? Do I like my children?" And if the answers to
Mhm.
those are you're having issues with them, then you really have to assess yourself because you're the one who created this environment that you're living in right now. And we have to create an education that's for our children. And I would like it to be small groups of families who come together, and maybe we need to educate our children underneath trees again like we did before,
Mm.
right? Maybe we need to have a series of field trips. So I
Excuse
do
me.
field trips for my students where we bring them to the bank in the black community versus the bank in the white community so they can do comparative
Wow.
analysis between the two banks, right? But I want them to
Mm.
have an education. We can go down to the mechanic and then introduce them to the mechanic, and if the mechanic looks like them, then they can tell their story, and we can start to develop apprenticeships because we really need our children to develop
Right.
skills. And right now in the school, you can graduate, 13 and 12th grade, and you finish it and you don't have the skills to be able to sustain yourself or to advance your family. Same thing if you go
Right.
to college. So it'll be a complete revamping, man. Like, instead of focusing on the common core like they do in many states, I would focus on the core of what makes us the core of humanity, right? Like I
Yeah.
would focus on how do we get as many people with
Yeah.
skills in front of our children to give them those skills. Because as the great Ptahhotep said way back in ancient times, a person teaches by how they act. So if you got people who got poor character or don't have a lot of skills in front of your children, that's
Yeah.
what they're gonna get from them: poor character and not a lot of skills.
Yeah, man. Yo, man. But before you bounce, let us know
Yeah.
how
Wow,
can
that's
people
incredible. And
link with
Tishango,
you?
where can we find? Yeah, where can people find that?
Yes. So at Reawakening the African Genius Mind, African with a K, it's named after two of my favorite scholars, which are Amos Wilson's work and Asa Hilliard's work. So that's Reawakening the African Genius Mind.com.
Mm.
And you can get the book there. And we have a class called Becoming a Malcolm Expert, which we're hoping to have Brother Amari come on. But we just had Zach
Mm.
Kondo on there. And again,
Wow.
trying to have the best in front of our children. And, Malcolm has been such a huge influence on us, so it's very important we pass that forward. But Charisma, I feel like you have
Man.
one other question. I don't want to miss out on that.
Well, I was just I know, and it's crazy because we're dealing with technology and the delay. Speaking of being at home and trying to figure all this stuff out, but I thought it was really important you tying in the importance of nature and also of community because I remember being a kid and having that sense of community and knowing all of the people that had the corner stores and knowing the people that were the barbershop and the locksmith and all the people in the neighborhood that are doing all these different jobs and filling all these different um, they're filling all these different roles in the community for our children, and I feel like we've gotten away from that and gotten tied to a lot of distractions. So I think circling back to that is also equally as important as learning from our ancestors and getting out in nature. So thank you for
Abs-
sharing.
No, absolutely. And essentially that becomes our safety net, right? So when our children do something that we
Yeah.
don't want them to do in the community, but if that person, that store owner knows us, then they can bring them back to us. And then we can talk about, working out something. Whereas opposed, we don't need to call police or other outside forces to deal with our own children. It really creates, opportunities for them.
Right.
So thank you again
Well,
both
look,
for
man.
having me.
And an
Yo,
extended
man. Yeah,
family.
bro. We really appreciate you coming through to Shango. I mean, me and you could rap for hours like we usually do. So, you know what I mean? But I'm glad that people got a taste of the things that we talk about and where they can really access you and see much more of what you have to offer, man. So thank you for coming by, bro.
Yeah, thank you. Y'all stay strong.
Yeah, man.
Yes, thank you so
This has
much.
been another episode of 28 Days and Beyond.
Where we talk about our history, our heritage, and our culture. I'm Charisma, and I'll see you next time.
Peace.